Hey everyone, thanks for joining us tonight. Sorry it's a little bit late. My wife was printing something and the printer's right behind my microphone. So it's really loud. What I'm going to do, we have a special guest for us today for Laravel CRM API. We've got Phil Sturgeon, who I'll just add now. Here he is. Hi Phil,
Hello.
thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I suppose we should just get started, right? I mean,
Yeah, what are we up to
Yeah.
today?
So, we are building a CRM in Laravel, an API. It's really simple. It's a CRM application. It's got some very basic functionality. You can authenticate. There's going to be roles and permissions, companies, departments, teams. Very basic CRM. But what I've done a quick kind of roughly what I'd want the API to look like to start with. Is I want to be able to go, if I built a Next.js app or a Nuxt app or any app tomorrow and I wanted to use this API, I'd want to be able to do certain things. I'd want to be able to manage my contacts, want to be able to manage projects, and I'd want to be able to log interactions against projects or contacts. So that's why I've got this
Okay.
slash
Yeah.
API interactions. I've kind of gone for so design the API I want, not just go for a CRUD thing, which is,
Yeah.
it's going to work. It's that minimal selection of endpoints which is going to allow me to do the most straight away, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I gotcha. And have you done any kind of planning on what sort of properties are going to be in there, or what the resources look like in general?
I've done a rough idea. Let me open up PHP Storm 2. Hey everyone, nice to see you all. Who've we got in the chat today? We've got Ben, Craig, Bernard, Michael. Ooh, God, everything's opening and closing all at the same time.
Yeah, I'm sad I couldn't make the last stream, but I was under the sea. I was on the Eurostar, so no fun.
It happens. Right, so that is my make file. What I probably want to do quickly is let's just start Docker, and I will get this spinning up in a minute too. So I've got my eloquent models, as you do. Not all of them are filled in. It will be multi-tenanted. I don't know. It shouldn't cause too many issues because the way that I'm doing multi-tenancy is that the core system, the only tenant it knows about is, the only data it knows about is the tenants. So everything else just redirects to, tenant.domain/API. So it doesn't matter so much. I suppose in openapi terms, that's just another server that you'd add as a connection, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can do you can have servers with variables in them. So you can just have tenant subdomain dot whatever your thing is, or if it's custom domains, that's a bit more tricky. But you can still make a generic kind of here's what the API looks like, and figure out some way to inject that later.
I tried to keep it simple. So we've got a company. It's got a name, email, phone, and website. I'm keeping it minimal for now for the purpose of tonight. This is going to extend over time, but I wanted to keep it really short and sweet for now because obviously you're giving me some time and your spare time to do this.
Sure.
So title, first name, middle name, last name, preferred name, email, and phone. And then obviously department is just a name and the company, and job title is just name. Team, again, name and department.
Okay.
And then user is just very basic. It's all relatively basic. I'm not handling auth yet. I'll handle auth separately. The main thing I wanted to do is, step through creating an open API spec, how to get started, what bits you need to pay attention to. Because everything I've learnt from open API so far has either been from yourself or Matt Rask.
There's not a huge amount of documentation around, and that is something that is changing and will help a lot. But
yeah, I just thought it'd be nice, get you. I'm building an API. If anybody knows APIs, it's you. I mean,
oh god,
blast from the past there.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of those being used as coffee mugs recently, but as coffee mats.
You didn't give me that many. So basically, all I want to do is I want to make sure that we set it up properly. We go through. We know how to create a request. We know how to model a request to response, and we know the newest version of OpenAPI that is available to use, so that we can use something like Stoplight Studio, or if someone else wants to maybe jump on and use Postman's version, I believe you can do it in Postman now as well. But we can go ahead and do that. One thing that I like mostly about Stoplight is the mocking part. I can just mock things and it just runs. It's like, oh cool, that's how I meant.
Pretty handy.
It's almost like testing, right? So I guess,
pretty much. It can let you know if you're doing things wrong. It's pretty handy. You can like fire requests at it, and it'd be like, that is not what it should look like. You know, oh, cool. I'll quickly change that, which is pretty helpful.
Right. I'll zoom in a couple. There we go. So basically, where do you start? Do you always start with just creating an API?
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. So obviously, you're going to be on 3.1. Do you go YAML or JSON?
Anything. I go YAML. It's just shorter. OpenAPI is a bit weird in that it's like a machine readable and human readable. And so like if you do find yourself editing the actual code directly, you want to have YAML because JSON's just a mess.
Yeah. What I do, I typically start by calling mine OpenAPI because this gives it the name of the file as well.
Yeah.
So I then create that and then I just rename this.
Ah, smart.
So I just say, so obviously we're going to have a server in here at some point, but I'm not going to worry about that too much right now. The contact information, I'm not going to worry about too much. How much of this is actually important straight away?
Straight away, not all that much. I mean, contact is fairly important, so once it's published, people can get in touch with the team or department who have been working on it. But like, if you just want to get started with stuff, it kind of looks like you want to just jump straight into paths, and you've got those 2 example paths down there, so you can just kind of tweak those and then just duplicate from there.
Cool. So why do we start there? So let's say we go to this path. This is the first server, and I'll tell you what. If I go back to that overview, if I added like a prefix of API, is that going to add that everywhere else?
Yeah. The don't
is that
put
what
anything
you do
in your...
or not?
Yeah, I don't put anything in my paths that aren't. I don't put anything in the paths that have to be repeated every single time, because basically the server URL. Some people want to make some people think of server as just domain, but it should be wherever your API starts. Yeah. So if you've got v1 in there, that's your API. Your v1 API starts there. So do like /API/v1 and just start the path.
That's typically how I build my API anyway. So that makes sense.
Because I see a lot of people trying to like smash v1 into the path so they can do v2 in the same file, and everything just gets gross if you do that.
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing, let's go for contacts. So we've got contacts. We'll just quickly rename that. I'm going to call it a list, and we'll say description wise, I'd probably end up saying, give it a title. Get a list of contacts. In the description, we'll return an array of contact objects that you have stored on your account. Something simple like that.
Yeah, and
how much detail do you go into this, right?
Yeah, you can usually skip a lot of it because most of it will be covered by the rest of the OpenAPI, but it's a good place to put something like, and this is scoped to your user access token or other sort of obscure things. Like make sure you use at least one query parameter or it won't load anything, like any kind of gotchas that don't fit in somewhere else. To your access token or whatever, if that's true.
This will be scoped to your company, I think, or account. As an account.
Okay, where does account show up in the request?
It's so a user belongs to an account. So at any one point, you are accessing. Like if me and you were part of the same account, we could access the same contacts. Basically.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So in assuming this is the first endpoint, so first page of the documentation, someone accidentally finds themselves on, then what would that mean to them? So this will be scoped to the account associated with your request access token or something, or
yes. There we go. Learning.
Yeah. Because as much as you hope people read all the documentation, they won't. They'll just find that one page and then just be like, this doesn't explain everything perfectly. What the hell?
Bitch on Twitter.
Yeah, exactly.
So basically, it's just kind of being as descriptive as possible. And what I'll do, I'll say a list for those who might be coming from other languages.
Yeah.
So it's going to a list of
and you could probably
objects.
just start with a list of as well, because like they're all endpoints. So just a list of content. Yeah, there you go. Nice.
This will be scoped to the account that owns your access token.
Cool.
Security-wise, it's going to be global security that we need. So is it security schema or global security that you do?
Yeah,
an API, a bearer token.
You basically, security schemes are defining the schemes that exist in your API somewhere. So you might have some that use HTTP basic for various reasons. Like, you might be having a legacy API. So you might say HTTP basic goes over there. And then these other endpoints have started using the new OAuth endpoint.
Okay, so you create your schemes and then you can choose on an endpoint basis.
Yeah, and so global security below is saying all of them, like apply this scheme globally, or you don't say something globally and you can apply them on a per endpoint basis.
Okay, so basically what I need because I'm eventually going to be logging in and registering, right? So I don't really want to be able to, I don't really want to go down there.
Yeah, you can save that till later.
I'll just add it here. We'll see. Okay, when let me add it.
Oh, yeah, you have to add something first. So these match up with the OpenAPI types. I don't know how familiar people are with OpenAPI.
Not that. I'm familiar enough to be dangerous, but not familiar enough to be you.
Yeah. Okay, I was just looking at the chat to see if there's much confusion with where we started off so far, and I just noticed something, if you don't mind me pulling it out. What's the advantages of Spotlight? It's actually Stoplight. Common confusion. Stoplight over Postman. So for context, I used to work for Stoplight. I've helped them build a lot of their tools. I think I helped improve a lot of them. Postman is a kind of an API console with lots of other functionality. It's got some docs and it's primarily an API console, but it's got mocking and a few other things tacked on. And Stoplight kind of went the other way. Like, it focused first on the OpenAPI design workflow, and it built a GUI on top. So if you've ever looked at OpenAPI, or Swagger as it used to be called, and gone, oh, that's a lot of YAML. Good God, 5,000 lines of YAML. I ain't touching that with a barge pole. I know exactly how that feels. That's why I wanted to work at Stoplight and help make this editor better. So it's basically a GUI on top, and you can flip to code view, and you can see all the YAML. Whereas if you're working with Postman, you do end up having to work with the YAML. I'm sure sometime they'll add more GUI functionality. It's not been a priority for them. But that's the main difference in editing OpenAPI is Studio gives you a GUI, Postman is hands-on YAML.
Yeah, I mean, since it came out, I've been using it since, I think it was going through beta phase and you're like, come and have a look at this. I came and had a look and I was just like, oh my God, this is amazing. It was just like,
absolutely.
Because before that, what I was doing, I was building up Postman collections, but never pressing send.
Yeah.
So I'd build it up in a Postman collection, never send anything, so I could design my API that way. But it was really difficult because then I couldn't design the response. It's just like, okay, so here's my API, I'm going to go build it. It just wasn't how it's meant to work, right?
Yeah, and so the difference between a Postman collection and kind of OpenAPI is that a Postman collection is a description of actual requests and actual responses. And so you are describing a request. OpenAPI is describing what a request and a response could be, and what that payload, what the validation rules of that are. So it's more like OpenAPI is more like like validation rules, and you can use that to kind of infer a sample request. Whereas Postman collections are like an actual request or response you might make, and you can save loads of them for each one, and then you can use that to kind of infer validation rules. But all you see is like an example of a request, an example of a response, but you don't know what other values that field might have. So they're kind of different fundamentally.
Cool. So, I mean, APIs are hard, right? There's so much going on.
Back to the task at hand, eh?
Yeah. So, I mean, if I was to create this in here, API key, this part here, and then okay, wanted to disappear. That key, is that like us looking for the header key, or is that looking for what's it looking for at this part? Because
Oh yeah, this interface is a bit confusing, to be fair. There's an OpenAPI, you have a type, so API key is one thing, and then I think key is like the name of it, and then I think that is, if you delete it, you'll see the name of it. Yeah, so that's the header name.
key.
So an API key can live in various different places, and so you might actually want to call that API key, the first one, and then the name is where will be the name of the header. Yeah, so if you're doing it in authorization, then you might want to make it a HTTP security type, because API key is usually something like, I've got a query string called API key, or I've got a value in the actual body somewhere. But if you change it to HTTP, then you can put it in.
So you can do query header or cookie.
Oh, sorry, on the left, so the API key type. Yeah, click that. And then you've got HTTP, OAuth2, there you go.
API key, bearer. It's a bearer token.
Yeah, exactly. Done. So that API key there is like it's kind of like a variable name. It's just like the name of the security scheme, and that will only be used internally for API stuff.
Yeah. So basically, then to add it onto here, I can go and say, okay, add some security, add operational security, and I'm going to use that API key. That's all I need, right? So that is the basics of, okay, I can send a request. We'll probably jump a little bit more into like the JSON API spec style stuff of how can I add parameters to say, okay, I want to include this relationship or that relationship, filter out this and sort that way. But for now, we'll stick with that is how we can send a request, and let's look at how we can get a response back. So, I mean, we've got obviously models. We've got request bodies, responses, parameters, and examples. The last time I tried to use responses, it wouldn't let me use it in the GUI, but obviously that would be the correct way to do it, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is don't worry about making things too complicated straight away. I think if you just kind of like use models and refer to them, sometimes responses and request bodies being shared themselves are just like a bit unnecessary, because you're not probably going to reuse a request body all that much. You're going to reuse the model.
So if I say, okay, this is like what's going to come back from the API, right? So this isn't my database model. This is how I want my API to work. So what I typically do is,
might look similar, but not the same.
So we have an ID, then would have a type, which is a string. I then typically add attributes, which in PHP is an array, but in this it would be an object because it's not keyed. It's got properties when it returns. So we'd have a contact has got a name, which again is an object. We have first name, middle name, last name, preferred name, and full name.
Nice.
That's how I would do this part, because this is like your fractal. This is part of what you use a fractal or whatever you're using in Laravel, like a resource. This is how you want to transform that request and send it back in a consistent way. So I know I've got a first name, middle name, last name, preferred name, and what I can do is spell preferred correctly to start with, but also I get so many typos.
Also, I did not know we had spell checking in there. That's pretty cool. And I've got to stop saying we. I need to say they.
They,
I didn't know Studio had that.
It's everything catches me out with spelling. Everything. Let me just delete that example so we can regenerate it. So that would be like our name attribute. So if we go to our contact, for example, that's the name, but before the name we kind of want a title string.
Oh, Steve, we've got a question in the chat from Bernard. Why did you pass ID as a string and not an integer?
So the reason that I'm passing ID as a string and not as an integer, because the way that I want my resources to be identified is a UUID. So on my models, I have an ID and a UUID. And the reason I do that is because it's quicker with MySQL to look up based on an integer than it is a string. So internally, I will reference ID to ID for foreign keys, but externally, when I'm looking up a resource through a URL, I will use a UUID because it's not exposing how many contacts I've got, how many projects I've got going on around the thing. It's just a common practice for APIs that I've adopted, and I've adopted it into my own way into the into making requests, I suppose. If that makes any sense.
A lot of folks use ID as like an internal thing, and then UUID as an external thing, and sometimes that's because they built the entire system around having auto-incrementing IDs, and then went, we don't want to rip those out, but we could just like hide them.
Exactly.
But yeah, you don't want to have auto-incrementing IDs because people could just go download.
What happens if I do number 435?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and have all of your database?
I remember it was about 7 to 8 years ago. I found an exploit on Theme Forest where I could literally just do a little bit of wget magic and download all of their themes because they had auto-incrementing IDs. I was like, ooh,
oh dear,
oops, dropped them an email.
After you download them all. Get them all,
and put them on the black market. Obviously, got to do it properly. So we have also got. Here we go. So we've also got phone string, and okay, that seems to be in the wrong place. So we'll put it here. We'll have a phone there, and also in here we'll have email as well. So, and what we're going to do, we're always going to have email and phone. Title. We're always going to have a first name, and we're always going to have a full name. The middle, last, and preferred names are all kind of optional values. So the way I'm thinking of this now is when I'm wanting people to add these to the database through the API or through a form or however they want to do it, if I was working with a CRM, I might not know the last name, but I've spoken to them on the phone. I've got their first name. They sent me an email. I've got a first name. Might not know the middle name. They might not have included their last name. You might not remember it. You might not know how to spell it. And they might not have told you their preferred name. So you can always start with a name and then backfill later. So I'm not making those required because they're not always going to be there. And I'm assuming that's meant to be how I approach this, Phil, or...
Yeah, absolutely. There's an extra thing, which is if you have an object and properties inside it are required, basically what you're saying there is if the name object exists, then that should be required. So what you want to do is say the name object itself is required. Otherwise, the name object is optional, and it doesn't matter what you've clicked inside that. You know what I mean? Yeah. They could send you just the last name. That catches people out.
Yeah. So I want to make sure I'm being
yeah, the next to name, you want to require that.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yep. Got ya. Okay. I know what I'm doing. Yeah, Craig, that was Ninja Amy going to make a bottle for one of the babies. Isn't having full name with first, last, preferred, and... It is redundant and it's not. I mean, it's going to take, it's in memory already. It's going to take literally less than a millisecond to append it to an object to return back. And if that means that you're making an integration easier, it means that from an integration perspective, I can choose how I display that name. I can choose to show their full name, or I could choose to show their name with surname followed by first name. It's giving options through an API by simply just allowing that extra little bit of processing on the API side. It's a value add, but not a lot of effort from my part. That's the way I see adding it in like this, personally. And what I would do is, oh God, why am I adding things? Wrong button. Wrong button. That one. and then attributes. Okay, so I won't add relationships yet, but what I will do, I will add like links, because I do like to add links into here. And then obviously I always start with parent, and then I always have a self as well, and they're always required. Although these are kind of optional, because if it is a parent, it shouldn't be showing. No, because ignore me. I'm rubber ducking to the internet. Ignore me. This is an object, not a collection, so it's fine. Mm-hmm. So that is how I typically do this. They are required, so it allows better discoverability. Typically, in between these two, I'd have relationships, so that I can do, okay, so a contact has a team or a department or a company, and we can link it through that way. So that is a model. That, to me, is as far as I'd go, other than creating an example. Is there? Would you take it much further, Phil, or?
No, that's fine. I'd clear out the example in there, because if you've defined an example, it will show that in the docs. And I think there's a predefined example, because we're kind of tweaking.
There is. I've already deleted it.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
So I can now click that. So there we go.
Basically, if you want to create an example, then you can, and it will use all the information it has available to make that. So if you've put email, then it might. Oh, that's sad. It's meant to make an example email using Faker. But you don't need to do this. Basically, when somebody's asked in the comments, how do you generate API documentation? Guess what? We're doing it right now.
We're doing it.
You'll see it. You'll see it in a minute. But you don't need to hard code an example unless you really, really want to. That's useful for stuff like if you have really variable payloads, like dynamic payloads, where if pet type equals cat, then you can have all these different fields added.
Yeah.
So you could just wipe that out, and
I could delete that.
One for you.
What I could probably do here is not the description, other properties. I could set the default for this to be contact, like that, right?
Exactly, yeah. The more of these fields you fill out, the more useful the API documentation is, the more accurate the mock is, the better everything becomes, the better the validation is if you use this for any sort of contract validation.
That'd be nice. I mean, I'm used to being able to say, a UID, but obviously...
Yeah, you can do that. You should be able to click on other properties. And so data types are one thing, and then there's format. If you click format, it's actually a select. You can
I didn't know
define autocomplete. There you go.
Sweet.
And you can do custom ones as well.
Oh, that is really cool. I didn't actually know you could do that. That is really cool. So now if I previewed that.
So Bernard, here's your API documentation. It's just generated automatically from the Open API. And so you can publish this off somewhere else, or just preview it for now.
So let's say if I go back to here now and go to my get, it's got a bearer auth. Here's my preview. I click on preview again, sorry. I can click on try it. I can enable mocking, send a request. Currently it's not configured properly. So that's probably still trying to get a user, which has now been...
Oh, what's going on? Oh, yeah, it's still showing
so basically, because that was a user.
Yeah.
Let me go down to the code quickly. Down here.
Yeah, you can rename that through the GUI. One thing that makes me a little sad, this feature I've been begging for a long time, is that if you rename models, it should rename all the rest of them. It doesn't do that yet, and I really, really wanted to. But you can do it in code quite quick if it's in a single file. And for responses, I usually just put the HTTP response. I'll just put OK. Just because
that's usually what I do, to be honest. I mean,
it's much more simple.
Yeah. So
especially when you've got it, when it's called get a list of contacts, what does the success do? Gets a list of contacts. OK, just call it OK.
So that's what I typically do.
Yeah.
So let me just delete that one because I've probably edited the wrong one here, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. It shouldn't have a patch request. I think you're okay.
Yeah. Well, you could just delete the patch request. That's all right.
Yeah.
Then you click on it, and then there's a delete up top. On the left. Top left.
Yes. So I can do a get request. So now if I come back to the preview, click try it, say we're going to mock, and we're going to send it, we now get a nice list of contacts. Perfect. So, come back to the form. That is typically as far as I would go. I mean, I could add headers, like say what it's going to return with, content
Yeah,
type application JSON, but
it does that
do I need
already. I mean,
to? Or
the fact that you've got the drop down there, like application JSON, that means you've got that set. So you
perfect.
only need to add things that aren't being covered. I like to add things like cache controls, just to like
Okay.
basically, you don't need to describe every single thing that's going to appear in the message. You need to define things that matter and things that the user should look out for. So if you
Okay.
define cache controls, example value or default value 3600, sorry, 360, whatever, then
Yeah.
it's gonna say like it's probably gonna cache for this amount of time. But that
Yeah.
value could change, right? That's the beauty of cache control. So it just lets people know to look out for it and point out that it might change and why it might change. Like cache control may go up before a deployment, or it may go down
Yeah.
if we have some sort of
And this is where you'd
like,
add that,
exactly, yeah.
basically. So this would be the header
You spell that right as well.
quiche control.
Quiche control. No quiches here. Get out of here with that shit.
And what is this? This comes through as an integer, doesn't it?
Yeah. No, it's string. You can have like max hyphen age.
Yeah,
equals
you can.
60 seconds.
But
or
the one
whatever.
thing that's not standard in HTTP, well, not the one thing, but the one thing we can't control much of. This describes the age, the length of time this will be cached for. This may change closer to a new deployment, for example, like you said.
Yeah,
And
just give people hints about things.
yeah,
And again, you can define common shared headers and then apply those. So if you were to add them, they haven't got a GUI for it on the left there. But yeah, you can like ref them in if you do it in code view. But you'd have to
okay.
write this out every single time. That would be really
Yeah.
boring.
Oh yeah, cause, yeah, I've seen that in a few other places where you can just ref little objects here and there, and it's really useful, right?
Yeah.
If I was going to write it by hand, that is exactly what I'd do, but I don't have that patience.
Yeah, that's what you're doing when you use the stuff on the left. It's an annoying quirk of OpenAPI is that like if you're doing headers on the request, then it's a parameter. If you're doing headers on the response, it's a totally other type of object. So it's really hard to GUI that up because if people see headers there, they'll try and use that for request things and then it just breaks. So quirks.
So I mean, to me, that's an endpoint done, right? Is there any operation ID? What's your convention for this? Do you have one you use yourself, or?
Yeah, I'll usually try and keep it real simple. So like I try and avoid just making it like HTTP verb then thing. So I'll just try and do maybe I'll say get contacts and get contact. And yeah, sure, it's going to say delete delete contacts. But other than that, I'll say like because people don't know what put patch are for sometimes, I'll call it like update
Partial
foo.
update.
I always struggle with conventions. I feel like every API I come up with a much better convention that I'll use from now on out, and then it changes slightly. And it honestly doesn't matter that much as long as you're a bit consistent with your APIs. But you can do things like update foo and replace foo, because put is replacing the entire object, or update partial, update full. But generally those
So I
aren't
typically
used
do
for...
put requests instead because I've probably just been lazy, but it's just like
sure.
Just
They're
send
useful
me
for
the
different
object
things,
back.
right?
I mean,
Like sometimes you want to replace the whole damn thing all at once. Like this request is the source of truth. I know what I'm talking about. Put this value on the server because nothing else matters. And then for other things, you're like, I want to change this value without wiping out shit other people might have done while I was thinking about changing this value. And it really depends on the context. Like you don't want partial updates on an address because then you have an invalid address. Right? If I change the address line 1 and someone else changes city, then you've just got a weird invalid address. But yeah, it depends. Things like images are great at use input because you can just be like, upload avatar. Like I don't know if I've already got one. I don't know if I've got 5. I don't know if I just tried to upload this before or whether I've just had to retry. Like whatever you're doing, that is the state of it now.
Yeah.
So
This is a
sometimes
new
I have both.
object. No matter what else is going on in the world, basically, right?
Yeah.
So let's look at a post request. So we can add a post operation, and this will be create a new contact. So I'm very, I just do it all wrong, okay? So we post contacts, and I'm just going to add store on the end. So basically, method, resource, and the store part there, that is like what I'd call it in my, that's what I'd do the request name in Laravel. So if I go to my code quickly,
Sure. I mean,
open up
again,
API.
that's probably leaning on people's understanding of what post is, like what HTTP is. I mean, I just call that create contact, because that's literally what it is. You're just to create a contact. They don't know what store means.
I'd add the name for it here of store. I'd add it there so that when it's being referenced, that matches up. Just kind of just an internal thing for me, I guess.
I see. So I mean, with OpenAPI, you're describing purely the outside world and ignoring everything to do with the inside world. So, I mean, I call it something like create, just so it's clear that in your API, post is to create. Or at least in this context, you are creating something.
Yeah, anybody using post not to create these days is, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, you can get really creative with stuff. I mean, people use post for updates. There are times where these things make sense, but at least if you're clear about what you're doing, you don't have to rely on everyone else in the world of APIs doing things consistently for people to know what it means. Like, it's just your choice to make it consistent.
Yeah, that description's not really needed, but
yeah. So, what sort of things will be creating a contact? Like what?
It'll be like
what's happening here? Where is it in the workflow?
So in the workflow, the way I'm thinking of, like the way I would use this is, I'd either be on a web-based client, might even be on the same platform, so it wouldn't be using the API, but it could be a separate one. And okay, I've got a new contact. Starting a project with a new company. It's like, okay, so I've set up the company, created all of a department structure of how where I'm getting to is okay. Here's my main contact. Here is who I am dealing with. Here's their name. Here's their email. Here's their phone. Done. Add it to this project. Or if it's on.
Okay. Can contacts live outside of projects?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So
cool.
it could be like a lead, for example.
Yeah.
So
lead, here's a good place to.
Lead.
I got you. It's a good place to put some hints towards workflows. There's not too much in OpenAPI that helps people understand where workflows live. So that like requests are just floaty and isolated, and there is work being done to say like this is this comes after this and before that. But what you can do is say like as soon as you have information on a lead or a contact or any person you'd like to keep track of, even if you're not sure what project or something else they should be associated with, send this information. So you can just kind of like explain what you just explained to me in there.
Okay. So when adding a new point of contact on a project, or when dealing with a new lead, create a new contact to attach information to. It's
something along those lines. That's you kind of get the hang of it.
It's exposing more of the why than the what,
exactly.
Right? Okay,
because everyone knows like you've got slash context and you've got a post. Most people can look at that and go, I fucking know what that means. And then like you've got the human creating new contact. All right, I get it. We're creating a contact. Like, but what is a contact in your API? And you don't have to define it on every operation. There are other places where you can define what a contact is. We can use tags and we can look at that if we've got time. And you can describe like, this is what a contact is. This is what an account is. This is what a project is. Because there's all these generic words that we as developers in the domain we're working in are like, it's pretty obvious what like a user is, sure. But account can mean different things to different people in different parts of the company or in different domains. And so like account might be user account. It might be a bank account. It might be like a company who we're selling shit to, right? Like
Yeah.
there's loads of different things account can mean. So you always have to try and describe a little bit about the domain and the why of what you do, and then any quirks in how it works as well.
Yeah.
So like on the last one, we mentioned like this is scope to your user token, or this, which can affect how it gets work. And post, you might want to say, I don't know. Post.
Okay, so for example, when I'm building things like this, what I typically do is I dispatch the post part, like the creation part with a database, to a background job. And what I do is I would dispatch that job and just return, so I can always return as quick as possible from my API. And instead of doing a 201 created, I do a 202 accepted. So
Sure,
say,
exactly.
Okay,
So
I've accepted that request and I'm dealing with it. And this is my
Yeah.
chance to say it won't be immediately created. It will be created in the background, roughly within 1 to 2
Perfect.
minutes.
Yeah, exactly. Because the average developer might know that 202 is, but I've also seen people use 202 accepted just to say like that was a good request, and then they return immediately. Like some people just look at the name of the HTTP verb and then just like some people will use not acceptable for validation because they like look at the words and go, that sounds about right. That's not what it means.
No.
So if you can add a little bit of extra human words in there to explain
so basically
what your intention
I'd
is.
add on this one is
This is an asynchronous request, and look out for the location header in the response or whatever.
Yeah, this will be an async request. So this new contact will be created in the background. Allow up to 3 minutes for this to take effect. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, my editor way of thinking is like, saying like this will is all a bit personal, but sure, that's your writing style. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
I always do like requests are asynchronous and try to put myself. What's it called? Like it's not the first person or the third person. It's like the no person.
Yeah,
I can't remember what that is, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah, no, I totally get what you're saying. This is your chance to like put this is like your dev voice for your company, right?
Yeah.
And you need to make sure it's got a consistent tone. And coming from a DevRel role like you did, you write blog posts a certain way, you respond as for the company on Twitter in a certain way, and you write docs like this in a certain way. You get into that tone of voice of how you want to represent the company professionally. Whereas this is more just me hacking in an evening.
Yeah.
This is my tone of voice. It kind of just sometimes professional, sometimes.
Yeah.
But I totally get what you mean. You need to keep it kind of informative and less. The way I'd read this, if this was a different API, it's like, okay, so it's definitely going to be an async, cool, and it will be created within 3 minutes, and then 4 minutes are combined, so it's not there. It's like, but we said it would be there. It's like when Uber Eats doesn't turn up. You just don't want to disappoint people, do you?
Sure, if it's not done in 3 minutes, you get a free pizza.
Yeah. So again, add an API key. Getting loads of talk going on. What's going on?
Yeah.
I saw a tree emoji. I just thought, what's going on now?
Everyone's doing tree puns. For anyone who doesn't know, I plant trees in my spare time. Well, not my spare time. That's my job now. Ken, you've got a really good question there about how to define common structures for responses. We will hopefully get to that. I don't know how long we've got, but that
I usually do about 2 hours. We're 43 minutes in.
Oh, I'm going to top up some wine. Crack on with what you're doing.
Cool. Right. Now's my chance to tell you exactly how not to do it, and we can get Phil to just clean it up afterwards, right? Okay, so this is creating a new contact. So what we need to create like a body. What I typically do here is I add it in models. You're meant to be able to do it in like request bodies. But last time I tried to put it in request bodies, I couldn't then load it in the body here.
What you can do, so body, it's weird. It's a tricky one. Click out body a second and just remind me what we're working with. Just do it in line for now. So you could ref contact right there. If you click on object then you can click ref, and now you've got a contact. So
that's not how I would do it though, because the way I would see that is that I've got to send it in that exact format, which isn't what I'm, might not be what you're doing. It might be a form you're submitting.
Ooh, okay.
So what I typically do here is, if I come down to post, I would come down here, create a new model, and I would do this as a create contact request. And what I would do is I would say, okay, so what I'm creating, I know I need a first name. It may have a middle name, last name, third name.
So they're just like totally different contracts.
Yeah, just
that's tricky.
Completely different.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's like advisable, not advisable, but these are basically just the attributes that I'm expecting you to send over, so that I can say, okay, so you have to send over at least a first name, a title, and an email. That is what I expect you to definitely send over. And then what I do over in my post is I don't use that one, I use that one. And I say that is like the way I see it is like if I was to do a Go API like I've done in the past, is these models here are like my Golang structs, and what I do is I marshal that request into a struct, and that would look like this. However, the struct that I'm marshalling into to return is this one.
Yeah,
just differentiating the two.
I get that. I haven't. You mentioned JSON API a little bit before.
Yeah.
Does JSON API work in the same way, where the requests might look completely different to the responses, or do they try and maintain?
From what I've seen from JSON API, I've only really looked into it on a response basis.
I gotcha.
That is a good question, though. I mean, if it's got a standard.
Yeah, I'm frantically googling now. I've used JSON API loads. I built several APIs with it, but I forgot how it works. Because basically, I don't think it's necessarily very important that requests and responses always look basically exactly the same.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a reasonable default, and there should be a good reason for not. And I think when you mentioned submitting a form, what I was kind of thinking was that maybe you are leaking implementation of the client on the post to make it easier for the client. But then you're deciding that the shape of your data is more important, the way you decide it is for the response.
Yeah.
And then so I wonder,
so if I just quickly do a demo quickly of how I'd expect to do this. So here's a perfect example. I would create, like, if I'm creating a CRM, I'd want to create a really nice, easy to use CLI so that I could quickly add projects and contacts using a CLI. So I'm on the phone, cool. I could go, okay, so CRM, make, or we go like create contact.
Yeah.
It'd be something like that.
Yeah, but that's leaking the implementation to the client again a little bit, I think, because if you aren't doing that in the command line, then underscores make sense. If you're doing that in a .NET language, then camel case might make sense. If you're doing that somewhere else, then something else might make sense. And so generally, I think it makes a bit more sense to pick a thing and go
exactly
with it.
As.
Well, yeah, like just pick a format and stick to it as much as you can, because everyone is going to have to do a little bit of shimming on both sides. Everyone's going to have to like build up their request in a certain way and deserialize your response in a certain way. And
I just deleted it all, and there's no undo. Wait, no, there is.
Yeah, thankfully. Also, Bernard was asking, is it Bernard or Bernard? I don't know where you're from. Was asking if I have a YouTube channel. I am Crashy McCiderface on YouTube, and I sporadically do random videos that range from like turtle shit to like planting trees to bike adventures, and it's
actually a
weird.
really entertaining YouTube channel.
Yeah,
You can
sometimes
see Phil's life in a really nice stream if you just scroll through. It's from talking APIs and drinking cider to going to New York and eating a bagel to cycling around Europe to planting trees.
Yeah, sometimes I'm foraging for mushrooms because I'm hungry, and sometimes I'm like doing stupid crashes on a bike. It's bizarre, but yeah, good luck with that.
It's definitely an interesting life that you've led. Just looking back, like a guy from Bristol who's cycled around the world and consulted on APIs all over the place is now planting trees all over the country.
Yeah, but anyway, we're here to talk about computers. This is your life.
Yeah, good point. So you wouldn't do this basically?
I try and avoid it just because it adds overhead to. Well, I mean, it's definitely harder to model OpenAPI, but that shouldn't make things harder for your customers. There's just not much reason to do it that way, I think.
Cool.
I mean, what you could do in order to make them more the same is you could make your response could be less objecty.
Yeah.
Because there's not much need to do that necessarily. Like, it is nice to group different names together, but you could have that as a response on the side. So you could maybe change your response to look a little bit more like the request, or the request a little bit more to look like the response.
Yeah.
But there's no reason to do.
There's going to be a compromise somewhere at some point on the shape, right? If you want to make an API that's not only good to integrate with, but easy to write and easy to work with, you've got to find a compromise somewhere between those lines, right?
Yeah, and the reason I mention it is because it's quite easy to reuse models. This is kind of a power feature that isn't always super obvious. If you just give it a go, just add the body and
boom.
Yeah, if you add that and then preview it. Right, so here you're going to have every field, and that might not be what you want.
No.
And so in the past, some people have basically gone, okay, I'll make a contact create and a contact response or something, or there's lots of hacks. There's lots of if statements you can write.
Yeah.
But if you go to the form, then what you can do is there is a behavior property, and if you click on contacts, go to ref. That's it. Struggling to words. Go to ref. Then on here, you can go next to an attribute. What's an attribute that you would get but not send?
You might not send preferred, or you're never going to send full.
Never going to send full.
Never going to send full.
If you go onto other properties on the right there, left there.
Yep.
Yes. So if you click on behavior, it's not read write, it's read only.
Read only. Ah, nice.
Yeah, and so if you do that next to anything that is read only, and you can obviously do that for anything that's write only. So if you have password, you put write only.
So like type, that is a read only. UUID, or the ID there is a read only as well.
Yeah, because you're not going to know the ID on create. You might. But that's
attributes. Attributes is you're not going to write attributes, but you're going to write the contents of the attributes.
So that's tricky. Yeah.
Yeah. So how far down do you go?
Okay, so this is where you get into kind of supporting JSON API properly, like Cam was asking. So what you might want to do is take ID and type and attributes out of contact, because they're not about contact. They're about the generic response structure.
Okay.
So what you can do, this might be easier to do in code view, just because it involves like taking a segment and like switching it over somewhere else. So what you can do is you can, move them over a little bit and make contact be just about the contact.
Okay, so I'd grab title, name, phone, and email.
Yes.
Grab that, which means that I can drop the attributes. Won't want the type or ID.
Don't delete anything just yet. Keep that sticking around, and we'll go make a new object. So if you make a new one called contact, and then if you scroll up a little bit, it should make sense. This is also something that.
So
if I could hijack your screen,
a contact response or something, and then we create a contact.
Yeah, make one called contact and paste that in.
Contact.
With most of the stoplight stuff, you don't need to make a title if it is the same as the name. It will just figure that one out. But yeah, you can align that.
There we go.
Great. Properties title. Is there meant to be a title? Oh, Mr. Is it?
Yeah. It's like Mr.
Okay, cool.
Miss, Doctor.
Yeah. Cool. And so then the contact response, you could call this something like generic response, or like response wrapper, maybe like root response, but something appropriately generic, right? And then crapper. I'm just giving you shit because you're typing in real time. No, I mean, I type all the time. It's just you're the one typing, so I can make fun of you.
Yeah.
And so you've got this like generic structure, so make sure there's nothing not generic in there.
Got a model object. Example.
You could probably just remove description and stuff. Like, it doesn't really need to be there. Yeah, this is great. Then, so this is going to be fairly useless by itself. You will have attributes, and so you can define what that is. You can do type, object, and you probably don't want to put required in there because you don't know what's going to be in there. But this is as much of the generic response shape as you can think of.
Yeah. So then I can create a contact response, or on my response here.
Yeah, exactly.
I can come down and I can say, okay, so I don't want that. I want an object.
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, you want a ref.
Yeah, I know I do want a ref.
So if you just ref to the generic response first, it's the easiest way to see
response
it.
Wrapper. Like that.
Yeah, so if you preview that, you'll get an idea of where we're at so far. And, you know, if you're on it, people on bigger screens can see the preview as they go. So like that's close, right? Like we've got the generic shape. We just don't have the actual specific stuff. Oh, that's not quite right, actually.
It's not, is it?
Attributes is in the root. Oh, that's in the request. We did it on the wrong one.
Oh, no, I did. Okay, so come back to post, and I'm actually sending that.
Send the contact, and then on the get,
I'm getting an array of...
Yeah, so it doesn't want to be an array for starters. That was the mistake from before. So if you just make that an object, and then ref. There we go. Now make that response wrapper.
Yeah.
And preview that. Okay, so that's close, but there's no attributes in there. So now we get to do a power move. I'm glad everyone stuck around.
Cool.
Go on to... it's probably easier to show it on code, to be honest.
Cool.
So if we go into code, and then scroll down...
It's up here.
Yeah,
request
find
body.
that generic wrapper. That's request body. We don't want that. We want the response wrapper. There you go. Line
here.
19 somewhere. Okay, so the schema, add a new line and call it all of. And colon, so take that ref, the all of should be a line above, sorry.
Okay.
So, pop that up a line. It's a little bit tricky, but I promise it works. So all of is an array. So if you put a dash next to ref, what you're basically saying here is I want all of the rules from all of these different sub-schemas. And it's not really a merge. Don't think of it as a merge. It's just like I want to apply all of the schema, all of the attributes and annotations from all of the sub-schemas together. And that in effect will create a superset JSON schema.
Yeah.
So we're going to say we want that, and then add a new line with a new dash, and we're going to write a sub-schema in here. And so you're going to do type object. That might not be entirely necessary, but do properties. And then do attributes, because we're essentially overriding stuff now.
Yeah.
And
this
then
is type object.
Yeah, and you know what to go from there.
Yeah.
And that actually could be, it could be
oh wait,
ref.
no, this is a ref at this point, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I can do something like that. So type is ref. No
type.
So ref, and that is contact. So if I go to preview,
Hopefully it works.
and it
Boom.
does.
Oh man. I'm
We
so glad
definitely
that
spoke
worked.
to the right guy about this, though, right? I mean, you now work for OpenAPI, so
Yeah.
that is absolutely awesome. And
Yeah,
obviously,
and
on the
it's ripped
form,
out. Yeah.
you can do it with the form, but it's not obvious what you're doing on this part.
Yeah.
To make a GUI that's going to explain what you're doing, for this part, it's just
Yeah, it's kind of a power move, and so the GUI kind of the goal for it was to try and make it do about 80%. I think
Yeah.
it started off life at about 60%, and it might have snuck up to like 70, 75, kind of getting there sort of thing. But that was always the goal. If it's never going to do everything, and some
Yeah.
things will be so goddamn confusing that it won't make sense. So the code view is something you end up using sometimes if you're trying to do more complex things.
Yeah.
But a lot of users are totally happy to just sit there and duplicate that shit out. Like they'll just create contact, update contact, contact response, and if they've
That's
got
what I
like
typically do.
Yeah.
That's how I'd approach it typically.
Yeah.
But that's saving so much duplicated YAML.
Exactly, because when you
YAML.
start, yeah, exactly, and when you start adding more validations and start putting things like max length 100 and all these other things, regex patterns on there, whatever, you don't want to update that in multiple places, because then somebody will tweak that regex value in one place and not the other, and you've just got a goddamn mess on your hands. So yeah.
Definitely. So if I preview, that's looking good. So if we mock it, this is exactly what I want.
Yeah, although actually it's a singular one. I think I was wrong when I said don't do it. You need to make it an array.
It needs to be an array. So, ooh, okay.
That's awesome.
In the code, is it going to be
excited.
easier to do in the code?
Yes.
So basically, the schema is going to be an array.
I think what's potentially confusing here is that this originally, the ID type attributes stuff, is that something you do all the time? Is that going to look like that? Is it going to look like that in a collection? It will. It will just be wrapped in a data, won't it?
Yeah, it'll be wrapped in data, basically.
Okay, we can do this.
Okay.
So you can do it inline here, and then we can try and tidy it up a little bit in a second. But if you just do underneath schemas, just do type object, properties, data, type array, boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. Oh, my keyboard's going everywhere.
Because right now, I think some of your viewers will be going, all this OpenAPI stuff looks really annoying. And then the people who've been using OpenAPI a lot will be like, oh, these are some power moves I'm going to use all the time. So I'm really curious about how people feel about that.
So type object, schema,
properties,
type
data.
object, properties, data. Type is array.
Yep.
And then this bit.
And then just indent that inside it.
Like that or like that?
Oh yeah, no. So indent it in one more, and then underneath type items, just put type array, do items. So inside the array, the items all follow this format. It's an all of, which is partly response wrapper.
Hey. An array of response wrappers which are being overridden. Oh, that's nice. That is definitely a power move right there.
Yeah, so you probably want to. You can tidy that up by having a new, like cutting some of that logic to
like a response wrapper, creating another
a collection wrapper. Yeah, a collection wrapper is a. So you might call it collection wrapper, an item wrapper, or resource wrapper, or something instead of response wrapper. But yeah, it doesn't need to be perfect. You get what I mean? Yeah.
It's an item wrapper and a collection wrapper.
I think that might have just changed the title. It doesn't. It's not changed it on the left. Change it in. I think you can right click, rename. Or yeah, there you go.
Sometimes it's easy just to jump right into that code.
Yeah.
So that's an item wrapper. Here's a collection wrapper. So in that collection wrapper, what I need is properties, data.
Yeah, go and take some of that stuff you just copied
type,
from
array.
Yeah, you've already written it, so you just want to kind of move it now.
Type array. And basically this.
Yeah, do all of it and then remove the contact. There you go.
And just remove that
Yeah,
ref.
I would just leave it as... You can get rid of the second element of the all of and then get rid of the all of. It's just items ref. Because it's going to be a collection of... Yeah, there you go.
Delete that. And do I delete the all of?
Yeah, if it's only one thing, you don't need the all of anymore.
Cool.
And then you want to remove the hyphen because it's no longer an array.
So
what that does is you can, So when you have, well, let's just make sure it still works. Let's go and like tidy up the operation and see what it looks like. And then we can try and do a singular get and a collection get and the create and see if it all worked.
No, I died. It died.
Oh no. Okay, so if response wrapper doesn't exist, that might be confusing it.
That is definitely
response wrapper.
Not going to help. Let me hide the...
Again, this is something where having a, like, with you rename it renames references, you know. Cool. So that's a preview of the model itself.
Yeah.
So if you go on to slash contacts. Yeah.
So slash contacts. And if we go to his get, we need to amend this now to be, instead of a response wrapper.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's jump into the code for this because it is going to get tricky again.
Cool.
It's because we moved all of our logic around. So go to the...
Here.
Yes. So in a similar way to before, we want to do an all of and then essentially merge the relevant parts. So you want to reference, you want to delete most of that and reference the... Actually... The all of needs to go up higher. The all of that we're merging is at the root level now. So you can take the all of.
So if I just delete all of that.
Yeah, fine. Let's just start again.
Cool. Properties.
So we're going to say the
properties
request itself
is all of.
Yeah.
This is that.
And because it's the collection response, we want to point to the collection wrapper. So yeah. //
components
/ models, no schemas /
and that is
collection wrapper.
Collection wrapper, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cool.
And then, so that will give us the pointless empty one. So now we want to write the subschema. Remember that these are arrays, so they need hyphens at the start. So you do, boom, and then hyphen. And you don't actually need to put type because it knows what type it is. That's defined in collection wrapper. So you could just do properties. Yeah, and then data. And then items. And then... Oh, and then it's bloody, it's actually properties attributes because we're merging it into that level.
Okay, so attributes.
No, both.
Ooh.
This is quite a deep nested bit of structure, which is a little bit annoying.
So we're going to have data.
Just kind of how it works. Yeah.
Properties
so
data.
Going inside data, we're going to add to the rules of the items, and then properties.
And then we ref
attributes.
And then items, attributes, right? Okay, wow.
Because remember, so far attributes is empty, and so now we're going to give attributes some subschema information to look at. So again, this is a little bit gross to write out by hand every time, but if you set this up as a convention, people can just copy it when they add new endpoints, and it's not that gross. Yes, that should work.
Let's see. Body all of. Oh no.
Oh, that looks like actual property called all of. Yeah, so properties all of. That's the problem. Delete type object and properties. Just get rid of them 2 lines and indent it back left one.
There we go. Okay.
Yay.
Data array of an item wrapper, and in each one we got an ID, a type, attributes with all of that information in.
Yeah.
And that just works. Wow, I think I've got really hungry children tonight. Right. Wow, that is mental. And obviously 404.
Yeah, it's a bit bonkers and arcane,
Yeah.
but again, like the amount of duplication that saves you doing. So
the next time I need to do that, I can literally just grab that and just replace that, is what we're saying.
Pretty much, yeah. And that's something you can template, it's something you can document, it's some, whatever.
Yeah.
That's one of the tricky things about JSON APIs. Like, not everyone using openapi has to do this. Some people just use really, really plain objects, and like a collection is an array, and creating something is an object. And you can just really be really dumb and really simplistic and say the request and the response are just contact and read or write behaviors, update which fields you see, and that's that. But then you can get a lot more complex with it.
Well, I mean, the way that the way I'd integrate with this now is, going back to my example of the terminal here, is actually what I'd do is I'd still keep it like this, but I'd probably say, okay, so my first name is that, and my last name is that. But what I'd do under the hood is I'd be creating a value object in PHP with those things, exactly. And I'd send that value object serialized as JSON instead of sending it as sending it as attributes directly. It'd look exactly the same, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And that you always want to do that anyway. Like, you should never really just blindly pass things to the API. It's the same way that you if the API changes, then you can very quickly release a patch release that will kind of obfuscate that change. You know what I mean? Like, if someone just randomly changes shit, your CLI is broken, you have to release a new major version that conforms to their thing, and then everyone has to run and upgrade all of their CI scripts and Jenkins and all of that crap just because they changed their API. Whereas you can just go, oh, sneaky patch, and then you've got it covered.
Cool. So that's I'd say that's a hard part done, but I don't know if it's going to get much harder than that. So when we
haven't got onto the goat sacrifices yet.
Yeah, that's later. That's later after another bottle of wine, right? So that's just accepted at that point. The other things that we can do is we could accept the response. We could fail validation. This is me going off of Laravel validation code, by the way, because obviously it's a Laravel project. It throws an unprocessable entity exception with a 422, and that's just saying your validation, it sucks. How would I go about creating a model for validation rules, for example? Because obviously the validation rules are going to be very specific, but it's going to be targeting certain attributes. It's like, okay, so name is not valid, or this isn't valid.
What I generally do is I will create a bunch of models which start with error, so they're all near each other alphabetically, and I'll call it error generic. And then using a very similar approach to what we've just done, you can then error not found kind of is an all of error generic, and then the specific rules. Pardon me. So you can have error generic, which sets out the structure and some of the base validations. Then you have error not found, which is like you can just shove that into anything that's not found. But then you can also have contact error, or error contact not found, if that needs to be more specific, if there are extra attributes in there, or if there's extra descriptions in there of why that happened, or if you want to put like a custom message in there. So if we start off,
to be honest, what I'm going to do on this stream is build up like an error response
Yeah.
Because what I don't like the default Laravel errors personally. The way that exception handler works is it's not how I would like to. I like the API problem approach. So it's a lot.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
informative, human readable errors. It's like code, message, and a link to the docs. Where it's like,
What's Laravel doing these days?
so it'll just
They
be
just
like,
backtrace at you.
yeah, in local mode it will do. Yeah, on a
Okay.
have I got an API anywhere that I can
Oh,
test
it's not
with?
important. I'm
Yeah.
just nerd sniping you right now. Don't worry
Yeah,
about it.
no, I haven't had an error in my API for ages. No,
I don't code bugs. Why would I need to worry about that?
yeah, why write tests? Everything works. Okay, so the only two responses really is 202 and 422. I could get a 500 error if something's broken. However, with CI/CD, it shouldn't happen. But I should probably add it in, right? I should probably add a 500
better add.
internal server error. Someone fucked up. Contact Phil.
Yeah, there's a lot of people with a lot of opinions about this, and I don't feel the need to define every error that could possibly come out of an API because 500 probably isn't, it might not even be generated by my API. Like people will define everything, like they're trying to like gotta catch them all error
Yeah,
codes.
it's not
And
Pokemon, right?
right. And so like if 500 is something specific that your API might choose to do for reasons, like for actual useful reasons to that
Yeah.
operation, define
Okay.
it. But if it just means like my server ran out of hard disk or someone pulled a cable out, don't put that in every single operation. Like we get it, computers are hard.
So one thing so this is probably I think is a good question because I'm thinking of it. So in this case, forbidden. You're not allowed to make this request because the API. You haven't got the API key. Should I keep that in the response here? Or not?
Yeah, so this
Because it's it's like a precursor, so I shouldn't be sending that request, but it is a potential response I could get back. Am I doing the kind of open API version of teaching them to suck eggs at this point, or?
yeah, no, that's a pretty fair one because some of your operations might have
It's not always the API code as well. Sometimes it's internal permissions, right?
yeah, exactly. So 401 and 403, people implement them differently, and that depends on a lot of different things. I mean, if you're adding security schemes to some operations and not others, you might want to add 401 to those that you have added them to. That might be obvious, it might not. It's fine to do that, I think. With 403, it could be like, you've run out of meeting room credits. You can't book a meeting room.
There's
right
many
now. You're
reasons
forbidden
you can
from
get a
doing
403.
that.
But if
So that's a legitimate
it's a
response.
401 if you haven't authenticated because you've not passed the token. But the 403 is more internal, with Laravel model policies, like this person can't create a new contact or this person can't update a contact, so I've 403 them in this case.
Yeah.
Cool. So where do we stand with the 500? What would you do? Personally, I think because it's like a server error. Typically, it's not something that I need to account for. It's not something that's specific to the workflow about how my API works. A 500 error means my API isn't working. There's nothing specific I can tell you. It's just not working.
Yeah, I mean, things like it depends on the sort of API that you're building. If your API has to go and talk to another API, like if you are a ticket booking engine and you are, someone's trying to buy a ticket from you, you have to go and grab it from them, they're down, then sometimes if you haven't coded it particularly well, that might just bubble up as like a generic 500. If you have coded it a bit better, I can't think of the top of my head what 5 that should be, but it should be 500 and something. And so if you can capture that failure properly and then wrap it in a nice 50 whatever it should be, bad gateway or something, then you can
I want to say like
appropriately
502.
yeah, you can like
Let me Google that
appropriately
one for
blame
you.
the other person. You're like, there are server reasons why this can't happen now, and it's not ours. 500 is just like, I don't fucking know, could be a syntax error. Like, maybe don't publish syntax errors instead of documenting that you might have syntax errors.
So basically, it's one of those, if you find a use case for adding one of the 500s, you add it. You capture
Yeah.
your base requirements, and as you're going through the testing, you add it when needed, right?
Yeah, I mean, some of the best API documentation around that you'll see is they'll have a more like an article instead of in the API reference document, which is like this is stuff that response might do. You might have like a generic article somewhere, like a tutorial or a guide or some sort of page somewhere that basically explains generic errors. So
Yeah.
in our API, you may well see a 500 at any point. You may well see a 512. 512 means the moon is in retrograde, whatever it is.
Yeah.
My API does this all the time. And then for the actual API reference, you might want to just say only these things exist. Now, there are technical reasons why some people will try and put every possible one in there. Some people use things like Prism Proxy that will say like, whoa, this response is not defined, or this doesn't look like what you wrote in OpenAPI, and it will actually break if something comes through it that's not that. But if you aren't using those tools, you don't need to go through the effort of jumping through hoops.
Yeah.
If a tool demands that you define everything, you're like, fine, I'll do it. And you can use shared responses to make those easier to apply.
So would that be a case of basically at that point you're the OpenAPI version of over-engineering, right? You're going into too much detail. You're covering cases that aren't ever going to happen for the sake of being thorough.
Although now it sounds like you're describing our conversation currently. Being overly thorough. Yeah, just don't do 500. Skip it. Move on.
It's never going to fail. So I'm keeping Kubernetes. Okay. So that's... I generally don't do more than a get or a post on a straight resource.
Cool.
So my next step would be jumping down here, and what I would do, I'm just going to delete that because I don't want to go through editing stuff.
Did you want to try and do some error structuring, or is that not exciting?
No, error structuring could be fun. Let me just delete this.
Why is that there? I think if you right click on, you've deleted all of the paths. If you right click on next to user, make sure you're clicking the right one. I think you got the right. Yeah, there you go. You can delete operation.
I'll delete path. Same thing.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
I guess. If it breaks, it's your fault.
Yeah, operation should be get or post. I don't know why operation's on that because it's on. Never mind. UI issue.
Yeah. So let's say we create error generic. I like that name. So.
And I wouldn't bother putting descriptions and things. Yeah, it doesn't make too much difference. Are you going to model it on JSON API or problem API?
I will pull over what I typically use. This is what so I haven't used this on Laravel yet. I use Krell's API problem.
Yeah.
This is a habit I've got off of names escape me. Rob Allen.
I thought you say off what's his name? Phil Sturgeon. He blogged about it one time.
Yeah, he keeps moaning about something. See if there's a better example.
Literally just look for RFC 7807.
Who's this person? Always clicking the first link, right? So we're like this: type, title, status, detail.
Sure. Yeah. I don't get any points for memorizing the actual RFC name.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is valid. I think they're doing a new version of it soon, so it might be different soon. But yes, that. And so, quick thing to do here before you forget, because I definitely will. You want to update application/JSON to application problem plus/JSON, right?
Let me sort out my screens. There we go. So.
Oh, that's in the model, isn't it? But yeah, we'll do it on contacts, because this is something you can do. Sorry, on the contact operation, or on the post. Get on the post.
Yeah, I didn't do.
And then get on the response.
So here.
And then we've got to make sure somewhere add body. That will show up a type, and then you should be able to do on the right hand side. Oh, they don't let you do custom ones. No. Can you scroll down to the bottom to see if you can custom? No.
Oh, no.
That was definitely on the list. If you get into code, exactly, power move, and it will respect whatever you've got in there.
So we've got
Yeah,
No,
check it in there.
is it this
It's
one?
problem.
Here's a
Well, that's
422.
request body.
403 application JSON.
Yeah, just do problem. It's just problem plus JSON. Yeah, that.
Because I created.
Then,
how did I do it in Golang?
oh, nice. Yeah.
Problem plus JSON. So I got title, detail, status, and code. So
Great.
internal code. This is how I like to do it, basically.
Yep.
And it's
Let's
enabled me to quickly do it. It just saved me so much time. So application problem JSON there.
Yeah, so the object is just going to have some properties. Those properties are going to be type, code, description.
So I'll add it there as well. Come back to the form. It might complain about it got it, but I'm not going to click on that. So this will then we can then create this as a ref, right?
Yeah.
So what we need that error generic to be is similar to what we got here: title, detail, title, detail, status. Sorry, I'm going from a 49-inch widescreen to a 13-inch MacBook. So going from one screen to another one is like really squinting. And these are all required.
Yep.
And
so
would you
people
ever
know
add descriptions on these or not?
Probably not. I mean, especially on a generic one.
On the implementation, not the generic.
Yeah, well, it depends on how it looks when you see it. I mean, for some things, it might make sense to put generic descriptions on generic things. So the type is like a URL, and you're like, this URL doesn't actually resolve to anything. It's just there so that you know what it is. Like
it's a reference URL.
So you could literally just say, type is a URI that explains what this is. And generic things. So or like error code is the specific code of the error can be, more information can be found on the error codes page for documentation with a URL in it, so that a human can go, oh, cool, cheers. But you don't need to get too fancy with it.
So what I could do on this case down here is I'll do the post request for now. On the 403, for example, this could be a ref to error generic, but it is all of error generic, which then I jump into the code and I can override, like I did before, down here, all of.
Yeah, all of ref the first, override the
it's
second.
so hard to scroll through this sometimes.
I know. Especially bad when it gets to 5,000.
So schema.
All of, bump it down with a hyphen.
Not that one.
Whack another one in.
Where is it? Here it is.
Oh, yeah.
Schema.
Yeah.
Properties.
It's all off on it as well.
And then what we'd want to do is say like title. It's going to be the same, right? For this.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Okay. So what I typically do, on this part is I'll have like a meta. So if I go to like how it's done in Golang quickly, there's a meta which is like a map of strings. Because then what that allows me to do is do like meta is the would be the body if it's a validation thing. So meta will have like errors within it for validation, for example.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So here's the reason you got the error.
Yeah. So here's about the error, and then meta contains more specifics. I don't know if that's the correct way to do it.
Is there anything you can do about your screen being a little blurry? Is that something you have control over? 2 people have commented it's a bit off.
How is it now? Let me tell you what. I'll go on YouTube on the other screen and see how it's looking.
Try reloading. Looks fine here. Okay, might be on the user side now.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first time I'm streaming in 4K from Wales, so no, it's looking fine for me.
Nice. Shout out from the Garoo Valley right now.
Yeah, I'm actually moving in a week. Fingers crossed. Just booked the removal man.
Nice.
Other side of the valley in Wales, so it's still gonna be wet and rainy. So, how would you approach this? So, if this was a validation error, what would you do basically? Because obviously you want your details,
so you've got...
you want your information, right?
Oh, I see. You're trying to say like name is required.
Yeah.
Or... That's a bit more tricky to do. That's very tricky to do. If we were to focus on setting up like error not found and error validation, and putting those in, then we can plug one in afterwards. But I think just to show folks how the basic part works first.
Yeah. Error not found. So this is where we want to do that all of magic, right?
Yeah.
Error generic. Then we can go to code. So...
Oh, that's sad. It doesn't let you do all of refs. It just does all of or refs. Yeah, that's another kind of failure of the GUI, I guess.
Would you then do it like this, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And then so it's just the same thing. So the you might want to put type with an example value of the URL that would be the type. Or if you have codes, an example of the actual error code that it would be.
Okay.
Or default instead of example, sorry.
So what would I do here? Let's see how this is.
Your error response, if you're doing problem API, like literally RFC 7807, which for the viewers was why we changed the MIME type, because RFC 7807 has a slightly different MIME type that lets you know specifically it's that. Yeah, there you go. Finally got some credit for it. Second attempt. Problem API has a specific structure for the main top parameters, and then it says, and add whatever else you like. So you can add a type, which is a URL or URI, sorry, and that might be https://api.acme.com/errors /error not found, or whatever conventions you want to use, but it's something that is unique to you. And by putting your domain name in there that you own, that is inherently unique to you. And so instead of just having arbitrary codes like error 12345 means not found, that's not helpful, and that error could have come from anyone. How do you know that you owned it? NFTs. So you want to put like a URL
slight dig in there.
Yeah. So if you were to do that, like error generic might not have any examples in it, might have some examples for some properties, whatever. We can just do it here. So if type was one of your properties, I can't remember if it was. Click on error generic.
No, it was like title, for example.
Oh, cool. Title. Cool. Then let's just do it based on whatever you've got.
So title, type is string. What would
you don't need to redefine type of string if it's already been defined in error generic. You can just add default and then the value that you want to show up.
Does that need to be in quotes, yeah?
If it's a complicated string, YAML cares, OpenAPI doesn't. Sure.
Something like that. I mean, that's something that you come back and polish, right?
Yeah. Well, that's not quite working for some reason. If you go to code again, maybe it just didn't refresh, or maybe there's an error. Yeah, there you go. YAML errors will stop it processing sometimes.
We're getting one somewhere else. 403.
Else schema. Never heard of that.
Me neither.
Oh yeah, you haven't got an all of in. I was trying to like mutter it quietly, but
Oh, and here.
schema, yeah. You can just like type it in and then tab them across. You don't have to. Okay. There you go. And then security schemas. Oh, it doesn't matter. It's got a name it doesn't like for security schemas, but that's not relevant.
So that is problem JSON for forbidden properties title.
Okay, it's just gone back in time a little bit. We want to call it title not found because we're.
Yeah,
Oh no, sorry. Right. We did that. So instead of overriding it
it
here,
kind of undid itself there, I think.
Oh, I see. Well, no, I think you've defined error not found, and now you just want to ref error not found instead of error generic, right? Because now you're in the operation context, you can just do error not found. Error. You need to put error at the front, and then delete everything else.
Yeah. And that isn't even all of, is it?
Exactly. So you can
simply just
again
schema.
that all seems a bit complicated in a roundabout way of doing it, but basically we're showing you that you can do a lot of this stuff inline, or you can do a lot of this stuff in generic, in reusable ways. So error not found is essentially extending error generic and then adding its own particular bit of flavor.
Doing this.
That's weird. Check and see if there's a.
That's down here. All of ref properties title default not found.
Oh, it's currently erroring the API key is not. It doesn't like it. It wants it to be like camel case or have a hyphen maybe. Yeah, you'd have to rename the reference to it yourself, but because now it's going to error saying you've renamed the API key. That might shut it up. Although we have had that error for a while and it shouldn't still care. Okay, preview that, and if that doesn't work, you might have to do a Command R to refresh. I'll piss off.
Title not found. So it's just a form that's not.
Yeah.
There you go. Refresh that load. Whee. CRM. Come back to the form. No, it's still telling me to. It's because it didn't have a type. It's not. For some reason, it's not pulling the type across from the generic error.
Yeah, go over to error generic real quick. Object, title, string. That's strange.
Yeah.
So error not found is just extending. Yeah, go on error not found and look at it in code view. Did we spell generic wrong? No. We've got type object.
Properties title default type string. So it just needed that.
Okay, but it is showing up not found in the operation.
Yeah.
Yes, John Hunt. This is stoplight.
Yeah. Hey, John.
Okay, so as long as the preview looks happy, then fine.
Yeah. That's the important thing, right?
Well, yeah, that's the error. Not. Yeah. Does it look okay if you go to contacts post? Does it? Yeah. And then you can see the response.
At the minute, we're just
cool. Yeah,
it's
fine.
Found,
for some. Yeah.
A problem for later. That one. That's going to be like a validation one, which can be built up later. But the basics of it works, right?
Yes, we're showing how to make reusable error structures, which is helpful. So
yeah. So error not found.
Yeah, cool.
What other useful tidbits can we do?
So you mentioned you wanted to try and do like dynamic stuff, and I would need infinite more alcohol or access to the keyboard to do that. It is possible. There's a lot of really interesting things. So like a lot of people kind of try and learn how OpenAPI works, and thankfully in OpenAPI 3.1, OpenAPI, once you get inside the schema object, it's just JSON schema. And JSON schema has a lot more documentation for how JSON schema works than OpenAPI has documentation for how JSON schema works. Yeah. So if you look at like If you just go to jasonschema.org, they've got some really cool documentation on like understanding, I think they call it understanding JSON schema, and they're always piling more effort in. Postman recently hired a whole bunch of the team of various different specifications. So people who maintain JSON schema are now being paid to work on JSON schema instead of being like 2 or 3 people trying to get shit done in between lives and families and day jobs. So the documentation for JSON schema is racing ahead.
It does look pretty good, actually.
And so if I was to try and do something with custom validation, I might do something like pattern properties, or I don't even know right now. It needs a bit of thinking about. But if you go and check out, like if you want to get into power moves and describing really complicated things, go and just learn more about JSON schema, because there's loads that you can do beyond like, this is a string and this is an integer and this is, it's an email address. Whoa, like there's a lot of really crazy stuff. You've even got if
I'm
then.
looking at the docs in a minute. There's so much that it's well documented. Definitely.
You've got if then else was added recently, so like JSON schema is now essentially Turing complete, and that's really useful when you can say like if this value is this, then I'd like to add these other completely different rules, and that's essentially a layer on top of all ofs and one ofs. We did all of, which essentially says all of these rules should apply, but there's also one of and any of, which say one of these rules should apply, and any of is like multiple of them might apply, like one or more. So you can start to do really interesting things, where a common example would be payment systems might accept credit cards, debit cards, bank accounts. Like you might be able to attach your what is it? I forgot the Dutch one already. Damn it, ideal, right? You get all these different formats.
You've not long got your nationality there. You kind of forgot it already.
I'm basically Dutch. It's been a long day. And so you get all these different things, and what they do is kind of like a polymorphism comes into play, where you can say, I expect it to be any one of these shapes. And so you can say, I'd expect it to have these common fields, and then one of these subschemas. So it would be account number and sort code, or credit card number and last four, or you know what I mean? And you can start to do that sort of stuff. So you can get really advanced with it inside your models, because inside your models, it is now just JSON schema.
That is cool. I mean, just being able to do that in your schema is going to be, well, it's going to cut down the amount of YAML you use overall, right? But being able to do stuff like that is going to be helpful going forward.
Yeah.
John seems like we're going to do something clever.
Yeah, sorry, John, you missed all the clever stuff.
Phil's going to drink more wine. I'm going to drink more Mountain Dew, and we're just going to talk OpenAPI.
Yeah, we did a bunch of really cool stuff a minute ago, and now what else can you think? So basically, what you've got now is you've got an OpenAPI file, and that could be API documentation if you want. What's next? You're on a mission to create a Laravel CRM API.
Yes.
Do you want to show people how to do the mocking, so you can like use curl to like hit a fake API to get feedback?
How? I've not really done the mocking properly.
Yeah, so what you've done, if you click on mocks, when you're using Studio Desktop, what you get is Studio Desktop is the downloadable, works on Windows, Mac, Linux, whatever machine. Doesn't really matter. We're not here to talk about Stoplight. The point is it uses a tool called Prism. You can use Prism by itself or with Stoplight, doesn't matter. It's an open source tool, also made by Stoplight, but whatever. You can run that on the command line. Studio Desktop's running it for you. The point of mocking is that right now, Steve is going to pretend that he's someone else, thank God. And he is going to pretend to be a potential consumer, like maybe a client who might want to find out if the API is any good. So if you're an API designer, you might not need to hit your own mock, because you just said these are what the properties are going to look like. I know what this API is going to look like. Why do I need to see what my API looks like? That's dumb. But once you built your API, you might want to say to people, hey, does this look any good before I start building it? Because I'd much rather change things now than write all the code, get through QA, put it into production, and then find out that it hasn't got the right data, or I called some things wrong, or you can't have this in this format for some reason, right?
Yeah.
So Yes, Swagger Hub does it. Postman does it differently. I don't know if it's based on Open API or it's based on Postman collections, which are different to each other but do convert between each other. But yes, lots of tools do mocking. This is Open API based mocking. And so yeah, you should just be able to hit it
So,
and boom.
boom, we are getting.
So what's fun about Prism is sometimes people find it annoying, but what it does is it tries to be as realistic as it knows how to be. So if you have said that we need to have an API key, that means you need to define an API key. And conveniently, we were talking about problems API RFC 7 and 8. Oh no, I forgot it. 7807.
Oh, no.
Damn it. And what this will do, it also uses that format because it is a standard. So if you're using a different format, sometimes you'll see errors in that format. You know they're coming from Prism, and you'll see errors coming up in your own format. You know they're from you, but still, that will let you know that you are meant to have an API key.
So, bearer token.
You need to set a bearer, and it won't try and validate because it has no way of doing that. Yeah. It's just as long as it looks mocking, right? Correct. Yeah, it's correct for the type.
And then it's obviously got all of that, which is good. Is there a way I can like force it to? Where did it go? Move this over next to stoplight. Is there a way I can force the mock to throw a specific error code? Like I can force it to throw the 403?
Yes. So yeah, it would be really, really cool if you could say, like, if this value is passed, then set this, but it doesn't do that. You can tell it, I would like to have the 404 come back by setting on the request, you can set a header called prefer, and then you can put code equals 403. There's always been plans to add some sort of thing, but like where would it live is the difficult part. Like, is that going to live in Open API and then people have to like edit the file if they want to change the logic and they might not have access to the file because it might be published on a URL? Or are we gonna create some random DSL that lives somewhere else? And that just sounds annoying. And
so if I do a post on that one, the title's not updated, but
oh, funny.
It's still kicking. Yeah, it's still kicking in the. If I just close that down a second, it's still doing the 43 error not found.
I know why. That's funny. So basically, Prism has two modes. It has it generates a response based on looking at all of your schema and all of the information that it has. And it tries to say, okay, it tries to build an example. If you've defined examples, it might use those. If you haven't defined an entire example for the response, then it will
look at all of them. For example,
then that should show up. And I'm not sure if it will there. Right, that's what I'm getting to. So there's two modes of generating responses. One of them is static, and one of them is dynamic. Dynamic is look at the schema and create random values using JSON schema faker. So it uses faker JS to generate fake values for all of it. So if you put email, it should generate a fake email. If it's not obvious from the types, you can actually add other faker values. There's a vendor extension called x-faker, and you can put x-faker, and the value will be like first name, I think.
Okay.
And it will it will give you an example first name. So that's the reason for dynamic is like, every single time I hit this API, I get the exact same values back. And so you might only get short names back, and then someone with a German name breaks your entire app, right?
Or Welsh name as well.
Yeah, a little bit tricky. And so, like even like a Polish name coming back with Cyrillic characters. Whoops. So you can use Faker to keep giving you different stuff. So it's not just coding it around this one static value. And then but static is usually what more people prefer. Static is a bit nicer.
Instead of happy path testing all the time, right?
Exactly. And so when you're running Prism from the command line, you can control that. when you're running Prism through Studio, I think it runs it in dynamic mode every time.
Yeah.
There used to be a way to change that, and I will frantically Google, but when you have a play around for a second.
Right, can I? There's no preferences really, is there?
There's no preferences in the UI, which is annoying. There are, if you're doing this
Yeah.
on hosted stoplight, you see it in the UI.
Yeah.
You can,
Well,
like,
this is a
dynamic
free
on or off.
version, right? This is a free
Yeah,
product. It's doing mocking out the box, documenting out the box. It's doing all of this stuff out the box for you. Um,
yeah,
you're only going to get so much for free, right? They're a company at the end of the day. They've
sure.
got to be able to pay people. They've got to be able to fund their own internal development as well.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to quickly message my wife because I've not spoken to her for a while. Apparently, she had a crazy time with the kids. Oops. I've only just
I
seen
think
her
you might.
messages. So I'm going to offer to buy her a Chinese.
Ooh, yeah, I'm getting peckish.
Yeah, I'm starting to get angry as well. How long have we been streaming for now? Last time I stopped my stream early was for a Chinese. I tried not to do it early today. So we've been going for an hour and 50 minutes already. And so what I'll quickly show people is we've not been adding things really into our a repo through PHP Storm here, but what we've done is, if I come to PHP Storm, let me just close all these tabs quickly. I've added it so that my openapi is already in here.
Ta-da!
So it's version controlled by default. So when you're going through what you typically do is in a development workflow, if you're going to follow sort of like the Git flow, you'd have your develop branch and okay, so I'm going to do a new feature. So I'd create a new feature branch and I say, okay, so endpoint design for a feature. I then merge that back into develop. I can then go and create the features around building out that API afterwards. And it's all very nice chunked bits of features in Git, in GitHub, however you're doing it, in a nice, really digestible chunk that you can track back to and you can see the progression. It would just be nice if you could have like a way to test contract testing in Laravel against OpenAPI. That would be nice.
I mean, there's loads of ways. Were you doing a bit there? Is that a joke, or because there's loads of ways to do that?
What, in Laravel?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were setting up for it. Like, wouldn't it be nice if you could do this thing? I released a package last week. I can't remember
I've been thinking about releasing a package, but
Okay, yeah. So that's actually the next thing. So one of the things I think a lot of people get confused about OpenAPI because it always seems like it's this other separate thing. And
it's not.
Because it's this like you have your code over here and you have OpenAPI over here, and like, why am I going to make this first? I'm just going to like make a bunch of code and then output that. Fuck it, right? And they think about it in this like second other. It's just going to get out of date. I'm not going to keep it up, whatever. But the benefit to putting it in your GitHub repo, like you mentioned, is that you can update them both at the same time, but you can do a lot more than that. That relies on people knowing it exists and bothering to do it. What you can do is you can use OpenAPI in two ways to simplify your coding process. You can actually use it for request validation. There's a lot of middlewares that exist that basically say, hey, I'm going to register a middleware. This is my OpenAPI. It knows what URL, it knows what method, it knows what content type. Therefore, it can look up the schema, and then you don't have to write any code that says, I expect this value to be an email, and this should only exist if that exists, and this is required, and that's not. You can just have PHP do that for you. And you might still have some validation on your models. You don't want to just say like internally everything's mad, but you can skip a whole lot of nonsense, and then you don't have to worry about writing tests.
You don't have to worry about hitting that, going through that request validation and doing is this that. You can hit it early in that middleware, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you're, instead of writing code that says, instead of repeating your contract, you've already written your contract in OpenAPI. You don't need to repeat your contract in your request validation and then repeat it in your response contract testing. What you can do in multiple different testing systems, including Behat, as someone's mentioned in the thing, PHP unit, literally anything. You can say, for the responses, it's easy. For the responses, you say, I would like to do your normal integration tests, right? Like I would like to post this whole bunch of information, and then I expect the error that comes back to be a valid contact, right?
Yeah.
That means that you have tested that your Open API matches your code because the response has come back and you have that. That means that your documentation of the response is correct because it's coming from the same Open API. So you don't have to have tests that make sure they're in sync because your contract testing is testing your documentation. It is testing your code. When it comes to the request, you don't need to have tests that confirm that your post documentation is correct to what you've written to your code because it's literally powering your code. Like when you make a post request, the Open API is invoked, validated against the JSON, right? And then so if your contract tests work, if the requests that you try to make in your integration tests work, then your Open API is correct.
Okay.
So like there's just one source of truth and it's Open API. Get loads of code out of there. Just delete it or just don't even write it. Because if you're doing API design first, you start off with the Open API and then you add code and then you reference Open API.
I mean, I remember me and you having a huge conversation about this on Slack, on the API You Won't Hate Slack, about, I was trying to build some tooling around how I could do this in Laravel. And we had this conversation about, okay, so what... That fine line between what is Open API specific validation and then what's application validation. For example, is it a string? Is it up to a certain length, over a certain length? All of that sort of stuff. All the basic kind of generic objecty type checks that you could do. That can be Open API. But then when you okay, so I want this to be a unique email. That's your application testing.
Absolutely.
You know.
And so long as you're using the same standard error format, no one will know the difference, right? You can have all these generic errors being spat out by the Laravel app. Some people actually do Open API validation at the API gateway level, so their application isn't even wasting time with requests.
Don't even boot up. Don't waste a Lambda resource.
Exactly. So you can have all these different levels, and so there's always going to be validation that needs to come from inside the application because Open API is just looking at the interface, the eye of the API, but it's not actually looking inside the application. That's how I try and do it, and I try and preach it to everyone because everyone who's been building APIs for a long time repeats their contract in 10 different places, and you can just put it in one place and use it for everything. And whenever I tell people about this, at first they think I'm mad, and then they do it and it works.
No, I mean, I have to for between yourself and Rob Allen, I've pretty much learnt APIs from you both, and I'm now giving talks on APIs and that sort of thing. Just I'm repeating what you said, but what you said like last week, not what you said last year or the year before or 7 years ago. If we're on
that book is well old. I apologize.
I've been debating about writing an update to it, but segue. What's happening with the next book? Because I know you're writing that next book, but I know Trees is taking a lot of your time at the minute with setting up a charity, then COVID and Brexit.
I have been a tad busy with basically Stoplight was a full-time job, and before that WeWork was a full-time job, and trying to write a book as well as set up Dutch residency and create a Dutch company to get my residency and start a charity planting trees and cycle around Europe was a bit much. Now
You make me look lazy, and I've got 5 kids, a full-time job, and I stream.
Right. Thankfully, now that I no longer, I'm leaving Stoplight to do their thing, I'm doing a little bit of work helping Open API, which gives me time to do amazing conversations like this. But I'm doing a little bit of work for Open API, focusing more on Protect Earth and finishing off some stuff for APIs you won't hate. So surviving other people's APIs has been sat on about 90% done for about 2 years, and I'm really sorry about that. But surviving other people's APIs is the first book I plan to finish off. I have been trying not to do this, but I think I literally have to print it out and get the highlighter out in order to finish the book. I'm sorry, trees. I'll plant more of you. I'm planting 500. I'm planting 500 tomorrow, so that should balance it out. But,
definitely.
So I'll finish that book, and then I think Build APIs You Won't Hate 2 is going to have to be changed to Design APIs You Won't Hate. And I'm just going to literally get rid of talking about gRPC and GraphQL because I just get there's too much to talk about.
But they're books on themselves these days,
Exactly. Everything has become a book in itself. Like APIs were a topic, but now everything we've talked about with designing APIs is a whole other topic. I want to teach people how to plan them, design them, and do the API design first workflow. And then however you want to code it, don't care. Someone can come to you and find out how you build one in in Laravel. Someone can go to somebody else to find out how to build one in Rails. But if you follow the API design first workflow, you've planned a really good API. You've got input from all your stakeholders. You've already got your documentation before you start doing anything. You already know that you can contract test it and keep it up to date. And then you go write some code and you find out if it matches what you said. And so that other books can fill in that gap.
So I mean, if I flip through that the first book, Build APIs You Won't Hate, it goes through stages. It's like, okay, so what's an API? Great. This is how we build an API. Here's some ideas. Pagination, how we're going to authenticate, how we return resources in different ways. It goes through step by step of like how you design and build an API at the same time, right? That's kind of what that book's about. How to build and design an API that isn't going to suck. And the way that the kind of industry's moved is now that we're doing design first. So the focus is on let's design a good API, and then when it comes to actually building that API, you're just implementing an instruction set.
Doesn't
really,
matter.
You don't have to make any of these decisions because the document, the OpenAPI spec, is telling you how to build that API. You don't need how to build an API from an OpenAPI spec because it's just code at that point. I think you're going to give my wife some anxiety there. She printed 40 pages earlier. We're going to have to plant some trees, Amy. We have to give Phil some money for some trees.
Or if anyone feels like going to protect.earth/donate, we could always use a little more.
Always. My boss was actually asking about that. It was like, is there a way I can give him money for trees? So I'll send him the link.
Yeah,
we'll get some more trees going. Definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, we're trying to buy land in South Wales, and we've just acquired a 64-acre ancient woodland in Cornwall. So if anyone lives near Lisgard, please get in touch. But yeah, charity is going off at the minute, so I'm still writing APIs for my charity. There's a lot of tech behind the scenes, but mostly I'm just in a field with a spade. Yeah, exactly.
Hannah Smith is doing loads for green tech at the moment.
She's planted a few trees for us. She was one of our first 10 volunteers, yeah.
I can imagine that, actually. I can definitely imagine that one. Put the link in that. That's a good... See, if I didn't have my wife, I'd be useless. It's, what is it? Project.earth, isn't it?
Yes. Protect.earth.
Protect. And here we go. A link is going in the chat.
Good advice from John Hunt about divesting your pension to get out of fossil fuels. I've literally put most of my pension and life savings into my charity. So if anyone else wants to loan us land with their life savings, get in touch.
Yeah, I mean, if you ever plant trees in a wheelchair accessible place near where I live, I'll come and lend you a hand. I'll just put like some dirt wheels on the wheelchair and see what I can do. Just put a sled on the back and I can just wheel around the field, dropping trees off to everyone.
Perfect.
That's about as much as I can do these days, unfortunately. Okay, well, I mean, that's 2 hours. I don't want to take too much of your time up, but there's a link there on the screen, protect.earth/donate. Go help Phil plant some trees. He needs something to do. He's bored. Yeah, he's been drinking wine, talking about APIs. He's got trees to plant. So go spend your beer tokens on some trees instead, and let's see if we can kind of help that carbon neutral goal get a little bit closer.
Amazing. Thank you. It's great to talk to you about this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great to talk to you. Great to see you. Great to hear you doing well. And thanks for the help. You know, this is really useful. I mean, the OpenAPI spec we just did compared to one I did last week at work. You know, I've just learned so many tricks of how I could shorten things and make things quicker. Oh, yeah. Bernard's just asking, how did you add the OpenAPI YAML into the app? Okay, so hey, Christoph. So basically, what you do, if we go to OpenAPI, Stoplight Studio. I don't know how to get back to like the
just
main.
Just close it, I think. Or maybe the
We'll do
3
that.
dots on the side, but
Stoplight Studio. We'll just reopen it. When it loads. So basically what you do, you can get from a Git URL, but then you don't have control over this clones it into where Stoplight wants it to be stored. You could create a new one from scratch, or you can open an existing folder, and that is all I did. You open an existing folder, you choose the application that you might want to use. I chose CRM, and what it does, it'll just create that references directory for you, and it'll just store it in there. The only thing that really bugs me is that it constantly complains about HTTPS for Git instead of using like the Git transport protocol.
Oh, I know. I've been talking about that for so long.
I just ignore it every time. It's like, no, because I have to mess around with my validation.
Something I strongly recommend everyone do, if you go to roadmap.stoplight.io, you'll see like upcoming things, but there's also like an insight button. You can add your feedback. And if you go there and say something like, the HTTPS pop-up is really bloody annoying, it doesn't do anything, why is it here? That does get filed. Please be polite, please be nice. The people that have to field that feedback are dealing with a lot. But the people that field that feedback are also the product planners. I used to be one of them, so I've seen some really aggressive stuff in there. But if you share your feedback, like it does get listened to. People do take that into consideration. The people planning it, even if they don't go, I will immediately go fix this. When they are planning new functionality, rewrites, everything else, it's in the back of their head. They know what people are asking for. So,
and if enough people are asking for the same thing, then they're gonna do what their customers want, right?
Exactly. Some people said, why don't you have GraphQL support? And it's like, fewer people have asked for GraphQL support than a next button on the documentation pages. So we'll probably add the next button.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I won't take up too much of your time because it's been over 2 hours. Huge thanks. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
Can't wait to can't wait to chat again soon.
Yeah.
For everyone else watching, description, a link in the description for Discord. Feel free to join. Constantly talking about the streams, helping each other out with any problems going on. It's just kind of building up a bit of a friendly community, basically. A few people in the chat are already in there, but feel free to join. We're always talking about what's coming up on the streams, what they'd like to see on streams, and I get that as feedback as to how to do a better stream for you guys watching. Thanks very much for watching. Streaming again on Tuesday, maybe streaming Thursday, maybe not, because I'm going to be moving at the end of next week. I don't know when my internet's going to get turned off, and I'm meant to be doing a talk for a Canadian user group on Thursday next week, so I'm hoping I still have